The conclusion I came to was, and it actually was a follow-on from my previous book, The War on the West, where I talked about what was being taught to a generation. And as you know, one of the things I said in that book was, we are teaching young people born in the 21st century in America and the rest of the West that they are guilty by dint of being born here. Mm-hmm. You are guilty of colonialism because some of your ancestors may have engaged in colonialism. You're guilty of genocide. You carry the guilt of genocide because 300 years ago, people who may not be ancestors of yours but looked like you did this thing, and so on and so on. And I said in The War on the West that this was a very, very dangerous thing because it's a mechanism of guilt with no alleviation mechanism for forgiveness. There's no way to alleviate the guilt. Mm-hmm. You're just being told you're guilty and you're stuck with it.
Mm-hmm. Now you can see the protests as a manifestation of that attempt to expiate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the conclusions I come to is that this protest movement has been projection on a vast scale. The students accuse Israel of things that the students have been told that they themselves are guilty of. Mm-hmm. That they themselves...
Well, they see Israel as the vanguard of Western colonialism.
Exactly.
It's the whole story.
So this is a giant mechanism of projection, which is why I say when it comes to these protesters, particularly the students in the West, I say, tell me what you accuse the Jewish state of. I'll tell you what you were taught you're guilty of. Mm-hmm.
Right, of course,
you were taught that you're guilty of.
Yeah, and no wonder that people rebel against that, because how the hell else are they going to expiate the guilt?
Absolutely, but here is a way. Yeah. And with the added thing that the Iranian proxies across the West, the Qatari money that has flooded through Western universities, not least American universities,
the propagandists,
the organized movements. It's not an accident that the same movement crops up everywhere with exactly the same slogans. Is it generic that students at Princeton again the other week are chanting "Glory to our martyrs"? This is totally imported propaganda just placed over them, and these dolts repeat and repeat and repeat. But all of this has been done so expertly because it plays to the psychological weakness that exists in so many people in the West who have been taught their guilt, have been taught culpability with no means of getting rid of it. But here you have a means.
Culpability with no virtue. That's one of the most striking examples of that, I believe, is, I was probably 40 bloody years old before I knew who Wilberforce was.
Right.
To my eternal shame, it's all part and parcel of the message that the Western colonial powers were responsible for slavery, when the truth of the matter is that the Great Britain in particular, waged war for 175 years on the high seas to eradicate slavery for the first time in history?
We not only eradicated, the British, not only eradicated it in the British Empire, but eradicated it on all the high seas.
Right. And
lost thousands of sailors throughout the 19th century. And every British household paid far more in household goods throughout the 19th century because we weren't trading with slave traders.
Right.
Compare that, by the way, to the fact that
there's
at the same
reparations.
At the same time, the Islamic world was gloriously still slaving away, and much of the Islamic world still does, by the way, across Africa and the Middle East. It's still doing slaving. So
unrepentantly and with no apology whatsoever.
But positively beaming that at the same time they can teach people in the West that Westerners born in the 21st century are guilty of 18th century slaving. So this is an extraordinarily dangerous moment, it seems to me, because the ground that you and I and others have identified for many years of deracination of populations, demoralization of populations, stripping away of all legitimate heroes, or ignorance of them, whether it's Wilberforce or Churchill or anyone else, that the stripping away of the heroes, stripping away of the national story in country after country across the West leaves this vacuum.
Canada leading the pack, perhaps.
Canada, perhaps the world leader.
Australia, New Zealand, they could compete.
They're doing very, very well.
They are.
But into this vacuum, something was always going to step. And there is no reason why American or other Western universities or streets, because it's not just at higher education institutions, it's, Union Station in New York shut down again the other week by hundreds of people chanting for intifada.
Yeah.
Intifada terrorism in the center of New York. What it is there's no reason why this death cult ideology should find itself worshipped in the free West, apart from the fact that we have allowed ourselves to be deracinated and demoralized and allowed the weakest and most pernicious imaginable ideology to step into the vacuum.
Yes, an assortment of weak and appalling ideologies, most particularly the idea that the world can be explained in consequence of the oppressor-victim narrative.
Yes, right. Oppressor, oppressed, colonizer, colonized.
Yeah. Proletariat, bourgeoisie, it's the same bloody story.
There's another strand to that, by the way, which I gave a lecture on this in New York last year for the New Criterion, which is that even if somebody does use the term evil in the West these days, and people are very uncomfortable about using it because of its theological framework, if you do hear the word evil used in the West, in the Western press, I give examples of this, what will people describe it as? Almost inevitably, they will resort to Hannah Arendt's lamentable definition of the banality of evil. And if anyone is interested, they can go and read the essay online that I wrote about against Hannah Arendt's appalling, misguided, and provably wrong theory on the banality of evil, which she applied to Eichmann, the leading Nazi and architect of the Holocaust.
The facade is banal.
There was nothing about Eichmann that was banal. He just fooled Hannah Arendt. But she through her half-baked theory, that's the last bit of the use of evil I noticed in the public realm. Something will happen, like, for instance, when drummer Lee Rigby was beheaded in broad daylight on the streets of London in 2013. The next day, a columnist at the Telegraph, a conservative newspaper in the UK, described the act as banal. The Guardian.
That means it didn't happen to him.
Said it was a sort of yes, exactly. It's hard to see decapitation as banal, unless you just have no other word to use in the environment of evil. But one of the things I want readers to come away from On Democracies and Death Cults thinking about is exactly this. Maybe there is such a force in the world. Maybe evil really does descend. Maybe it actually exists.
So when did you come to that conclusion? Like what? And is that a theological conclusion? I mean, when you start talking about the landscape of good and evil, you're perilously close to the religious world, or you're in it.
Yeah,
when I
absolutely.
dealt with my clinical clients that were severely hurt by malevolent actors, the language became religious because there was no other way of discussing it.
Yes.
And that had nothing to do with my machinations. There was no language they could use to describe what happened to them that wasn't profound enough to touch on the religious, because the depth of horror was so great that no other language sufficed.
Well, I would say one of this, and you know this well from your work on the Bible, but one of the things I suppose that would stand out as a definition of evil is doing it knowingly and gleefully and glorying in it. And that's one of the things.
There's a level underneath that. It's doing it knowingly and gleefully to spite God. Right. You don't understand evil. I don't think you understand evil if you don't understand it as the ultimate in rebellion against the fact of existence itself, the spirit of existence.